Important notice. The narration in this video is generated by artificial intelligence. The script is an original creation and not an actual recording. It dramatizes the thinking of Richard Feynman, based on his works, to clearly explore his ideas. Have you ever felt like a mystery to yourself? Why do we repeat the same mistakes? Why are we drawn to certain people? Or why do we dream of such strange and illogical things? The quest to understand the hidden mechanisms of our own minds, the ghost in the machine, is one of the deepest and most human journeys there is. And for more than a century, one name has stood out as the main guide on this journey: the original cartographer of the psyche, Sigmund Freud. His ideas, the id, the ego, the superego, the Oedipus complex, repression, the unconscious, not only created a field but also infiltrated our cultural vocabulary, shaping how we talk about ourselves. They offer a seductive narrative, a seemingly coherent map to the chaotic and often frightening territory of human experience. We accept this map because it promises answers. It gives us the feeling that irrational behavior can, after all, be rationalized, that our inner demons can be named, and therefore perhaps controlled. The problem is that the allure of a good story, one that explains everything, is immensely powerful. When a theory offers an explanation for everything, from a simple lapse of memory to the choice of a career, it is incredibly difficult to resist it. We cling to this sense of understanding because the alternative, admitting the vast extent of our own ignorance about the nature of consciousness, is profoundly terrifying. However, let us reject the idea that a beautiful story is a substitute for truth. The enduring popularity of Freud's ideas is not in itself evidence of their scientific validity. It is a testament to his undeniable skill as a writer and to our desperate collective desire for answers to the enigmas of our existence. And to dissect the crucial difference between a good story and good science, we need an intellectual scalpel of the highest precision. We need a man who dedicated his life to a single mission, not to deceive himself. His name was Richard Feynman. For him, whether an idea was popular, old, fashionable, or championed by renowned experts, was completely irrelevant. The only question that truly mattered, the question that separated the gold from the fool, was, can it be tested? Can it, in principle, be proven false? I promise you that, by the end of this video, you will understand why Feynman viewed psychoanalysis not as a science of the mind, but as a modern mythology, as scientifically valid as the stories of the Greek gods on Olympus. More importantly, you will be armed with the same tool he used to distinguish genuine knowledge from pseudoscience, a tool you can apply to all the truths you encounter, from news headlines and the latest wellness trends to the most sweeping political theories. This is not a journey to disparage the pursuit of self-knowledge, but rather to demand that this pursuit be relentlessly honest. To understand the basis of Feynman's devastating attack on Freud, we need to go back in time, not to 19th century Vienna, but to a logical principle he considered the sacred dividing line between science and everything else. It's not a complex equation, but a simple and powerful idea: falsifiability. Feynman, echoing the philosopher of science Karl Popper, believed that the fundamental characteristic of a scientific theory is not that it can be proven true, after all, future observations can always contradict it, but that it makes specific predictions that, if wrong, prove the theory wrong. If a theory cannot in principle be refuted by any conceivable observation or experiment, then it does not belong to the domain of science. It is a matter of faith, a philosophy, a work of literature, but it is not science. He often used simple examples to illustrate this point. In the Middle Ages, people believed that rhinoceros horn, when ground and ingested, was a potent aphrodisiac. They believed it, told stories about it, but never performed the obvious test. Take two groups of people, give the powder to one group and a placebo to the other, and record the results in a controlled and blind manner. Science, for Feynman, was precisely this crucial step: the courage to test one's most cherished and ingrained beliefs against cold, hard reality, and the honesty to accept the verdict, no matter how disappointing it might be. This absolute commitment to falsifiability became the lens through which Feynman viewed the world, and profoundly differentiated him from many other thinkers, even within science. He wasn't interested in constructing grandiose philosophical systems that explained the totality of human experience. He was interested in discovering how the world truly works, piece by piece, test by test, with a fundamental humility in the face of the vastness of our ignorance. This made him deeply skeptical of any field that seemed to rely more on subjective interpretation than on rigorous experimentation. He saw that in the hard sciences like physics, if your theory predicted that a particle should be in a certain place with a certain energy and experimentalists didn't find it there, your theory was simply wrong. End of story. You couldn't reinterpret the data to save your idea. You couldn't say the particle was resisting being found. You had to abandon your theory or modify it to fit the new evidence. This brutal discipline was, for him, the source of all the power and progress of science. It was the self-correcting mechanism that ensured that, over time, science would rid itself of its erroneous ideas and get ever closer to the truth, even if it never fully reached it. Any field that didn't possess such a rigorous self-correcting mechanism wasn't, in his opinion, really learning anything new about the world. It was merely rearranging its own beliefs and biases into increasingly elaborate and self-justifying patterns, an exercise in pure tautology. It is precisely here that the head-on collision with the edifice of Freudian psychoanalysis becomes inevitable and cataclysmic. Freudian theory, as Feynman saw it, was the perfect antithesis of its most cherished principle. It was a perfectly elastic system, an intellectual putty capable of stretching and molding itself to accommodate any observable fact, no matter how contradictory. If a patient had a dream that fit perfectly into Freud's theory of symbolism, that was proof that Freud was right. If, however, the patient had a dream that seemed to contradict the theory, that was proof of their deep psychological resistance or denial, which in turn also proved that Freud's theory of defense mechanisms was correct. There was no possible outcome, no conceivable observation that could not be interpreted, always a posteriori, as a confirmation of the theory. A man who hated his father did so because of an unresolved Oedipus complex. A man who loved and idolized his father did so because of a reaction formation against his underlying Oedipus complex. The theory was like a fog. It filled all the space, but offered no solid target to strike. For Feynman, this was not a sign of the theory's depth, but a mark of its scientific emptiness. He represented the ultimate example of knowing the name of something. Id, superego, repression, without having the slightest testable understanding of how it actually worked in the real world. The intellectual weapon Feynman developed to combat these ideas was not a physical device, but rather a thought protocol, a kind of pseudoscience detection kit that he applied to everything. His frustration was not with the difficulty of the problems psychology attempted to solve. He openly acknowledged the immense complexity of the human mind, but with what he saw as a glaring lack of rigor and intellectual honesty in many of its branches. He felt frustrated seeing entire fields adopting the superficial appearance of science, using complex language and publishing articles in prestigious journals without adopting its beating, essential heart, the absolute willingness to be proven wrong. He saw academics building entire careers, gaining notoriety, and writing books on theories that had never faced a single real, decisive empirical test. This frustration led him to refine his weapon, to sharpen his skeptical razor so that he could dissect the claims and separate the meat from the fat, the signal from the noise. The weapon itself was a series of simple but incisive questions designed to test the falsifiability of any claim. The mechanics were direct and brutally effective. First, what is your hypothesis, stated in clear, precise, and unequivocal terms? Second, and most importantly, what would you need to observe in the world to admit that your hypothesis is wrong? What experimental result or real-world observation would convince you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, to abandon your theory? Third, is this experiment practically feasible? If a proponent of an idea could not give a clear and concise answer to the second question, for Feynman, the game was over right there. This meant that their idea was not a scientific hypothesis, but an article of faith. It was a belief system so self-sufficient and circular that no evidence from the outside world could penetrate it. He immortalized this phenomenon with the term cargo cult science, describing activities that have all the outward appearances of science. the rituals, the jargon, the lab coats, but lack the essential element of intellectual honesty and rigorous skepticism. He knew that science is not about what you know, but about what you don't know. Imagine the scene, a dinner or social gathering in the mid-20th century, perhaps in an elite university setting. The air is thick with cigarette smoke and fervent intellectual discussions. People speak admiringly about the latest existentialist play, the new avant-garde novel, and inevitably about psychology. Terms like neurosis, oral fixation, and penis envy are used with the same ease as discussing the weather or sports results. A literature professor analyzes the character of Hamlet through an Oedipal lens, and everyone in the room nods in agreement, impressed by the apparent depth of the analysis. A woman describes her young son's stubbornness as a clear sign of anal fixation, and the other guests offer their own anecdotes in support, reinforcing the validity of the theory. In this environment, Freud's theories are not presented as hypotheses to be tested, but as established truths, sophisticated and indispensable tools for understanding the complexity of the human condition. Questioning Freud would be like questioning the genius of Shakespeare, a sign not of healthy skepticism, but of a lack of culture, of an unsophisticated mind that simply doesn't understand. In this scenario of comfortable and self-satisfied consensus, loose thinking thrives. People use Freudian concepts not to make testable predictions about the future, but to weave retrospective narratives that always fit. Reasoning is almost always circular and infallible. Why did John become a surgeon? Obviously because of a sublimated sadistic impulse. Why is Mary so obsessively organized? Clearly a manifestation of her anal retentive personality. Explanations are always applied after the fact, and they always fit perfectly because the theory is vague and flexible enough to cover any outcome and its opposite. No one in the room dares to ask, what behavior would John have to exhibit to prove that he doesn't have a sublimated sadistic impulse? No one asks, is there any completely disorganized person who, according to the theory, should also have had an anal fixation? Jargon becomes a substitute for thought. Words act like magical incantations that give the illusion of understanding, while in reality they only label ignorance in a more impressive way. It's an intellectual game, a way of signaling one's own sophistication, and everyone in the room knows and follows the rules. Feynman's perspective amidst this type of conversation would be one of growing horror and impatience. He was a man who had neither the time nor the tolerance for intellectual games. For him, the goal of intelligence was not to sound intelligent, but to understand the world honestly. He would listen to these conversations with his physicist's mind, always searching for the experimental basis, the quantifiable evidence, the crucial test. Where was the data? Where were the controlled studies? How could one isolate the Oedipus complex variable and measure its effect independently? He would see an entire room of supposedly brilliant people engaging in what he considered an elaborate form of storytelling, confusing the complexity of the narrative with the depth of the truth. He would identify the fundamental flaw instantly, the complete absence of any self-correcting mechanism. If everyone is just agreeing with each other and reinterpreting all the facts to fit their favorite theory, then nobody is learning anything new. Knowledge is not advancing. The group is merely collectively reinforcing its own beliefs, in an echo chamber perfectly isolated from reality. The tension, therefore, didn't need to be built. It was inherent in Feynman's mere presence in any environment where untestable ideas were treated as fact. The moment of intervention could happen at any time, spontaneously. It could be in response to a student at a lecture, a colleague at lunch, or an article he was writing. He didn't need to plan an attack. His very nature, his relentless curiosity, was the attack. Imagine him after patiently listening to a long and convoluted psychoanalytic explanation, leaning forward and asking the simple, childlike, and utterly devastating question, "Excuse me, may I interrupt? Just for my own understanding, what specific observation would prove this theory wrong?" He wouldn't do it to be cruel or arrogant, but with genuine, almost naive curiosity, as if he were truly trying to understand the rules of that strange game. He was applying his intellectual weapon, the demand for falsifiability, not as a club, but as a probe of precision. He wanted to know if there was any solid substance behind the words, or if it was just smoke and mirrors. The climax would be the stunned silence that would follow his question. The proponent of Freudian theory, accustomed to nods of agreement and purely interpretive discussions, would be completely taken aback. The immediate impact of the question would be confusion. Prove it wrong? But the theory explains behavior. The attempt at an answer would likely be evasive, an attempt to change the rules of the game. Well, it's more of a framework for understanding, a paradigm, not a predictive science in the sense of physics. Or perhaps they would try to reverse the question. How would you prove that gravity is wrong? But Feynman would be ready for that. He would calmly explain that any observation of an apple falling to the sky would instantly refute gravity as we understand it. He would then return to his original question with relentless patience. Yes, I understand. But what is the apple of psychoanalysis that could fall to the sky? Give me just one concrete example. The application of the weapon is precisely this: to force the transition from a discussion about interpretation to a discussion about evidence. It exposes the absence of a failure criterion. The result would be the slow but inevitable collapse of the proponent's authority. Unable to provide a clear criterion for falsification, his position would shift from that of a scientist explaining facts to that of a believer defending his faith. The others in the room, who had previously nodded in agreement, would begin to look uncomfortable. Feynman's question would have changed the atmosphere, injected a standard of intellectual rigor that simply hadn't existed in the conversation until that moment. By refusing to play the game of interpretation, he revealed that it was just that, a game. His action would not prove Freud wrong in all his details. It would do something far more fundamental. It would prove that the Freudian system of thought, as commonly practiced, was not scientific. On this distinction, he was direct and unmistakable, contextualizing his skepticism not as an opinion, but as a methodological assessment. In his words, "I am of the opinion that Freud's theories are not a science. At best, they are a medical process, and perhaps even more like witchcraft. They have a theory about what is wrong with you, but it is a very difficult theory to refute." What he's saying is devastating. By comparing it to witchcraft, he's pointing to the fact that both are closed systems, where the practitioner's faith and flexible interpretation are more important than objective evidence. The inability to refute was not a strength, but a fatal flaw. The universal lesson here is one of the most important tools for critical thinking: the ability to identify an unfalsifiable hypothesis. Feynman's question, "What would prove you wrong?" is a pseudoscience detector we can carry in our pocket. A theory that can explain any outcome explains nothing. It's like a horoscope that says, "You will face challenges today, but you will also find opportunities." It's true for everyone, every day, and therefore contains no useful information. This lesson is crucial because unfalsifiable hypotheses are everywhere, often disguised as profound wisdom. It's the basis of countless conspiracy theories, where all evidence that contradicts the theory is simply reinterpreted as part of the conspiracy. All evidence against the theory paradoxically becomes evidence in its favor. This is the hallmark of a sick belief system, immune to reality. You can turn this lesson into an actionable tool immediately. The next time someone presents you with a great idea, a miracle new diet, a foolproof investment strategy, or a comprehensive political explanation, ask Feynman's question, even if only to yourself: what would need to happen for this person to admit they were wrong? If the answer is nothing, you know you're dealing with dogma, not a rational hypothesis. Use this when reading news. Does the article present a claim in a way that could be verified and potentially refuted, or is it just a vague narrative? Use this in your work. When a new business strategy is proposed, are there clear metrics for failure, or will any outcome be turned into a success? This is where the heart of Feynman's philosophy lies, a principle that became the foundation of his scientific integrity and a warning against the most dangerous trap of thinking. As he himself said, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Asking the question of falsifiability is the best mechanism we have to obey this first principle. Expanding the scope, we see that Feynman's battle against untestable ideas was not merely an academic dispute. It was a fight for the health of our intellectual culture. A society that loses the ability to distinguish between science and pseudoscience is in trouble. When we allow unfalsifiable ideas to gain the same weight as rigorously tested scientific theories, we open the door to all kinds of irrationality. This has real-world consequences. It leads parents to reject vaccines based on discredited but unfalsifiable theories. It leads patients to seek magical cures for serious illnesses instead of evidence-based treatments. It leads nations to adopt economic policies based on ideology instead of data. The culture Feynman fought against is one that values feeling and intuition above evidence, the beautiful narrative above the ugly fact. It is a culture that prefers the comfort of false certainty to the difficult journey toward provisional but genuine knowledge. And this culture is always lurking, always ready to sell us a new story that explains everything. The weapon, therefore, is now yours. Feynman's courage lay not in his superior intelligence, but in his refusal to be intimidated by consensus or authority. He gave us permission to ask the stupid questions, to admit when we don't understand something, and to demand clarity. Empowering oneself with this tool means cultivating a healthy discomfort with uncertainty and a profound discomfort with easy certainty. It means understanding that the strength of a belief comes not from the passion with which we defend it, but from the severity of the tests it has survived. It is a shift in perspective, seeing ideas not as possessions to be defended, but as hypotheses to be challenged. Instead of seeking the certainty that pseudoscience promises, the true scientist embraces doubt as their most valuable tool. Feynman perfectly described this mindset, the opposite of dogmatism, with impressive humility, saying, "I have approximate answers and possible beliefs and varying degrees of certainty about different things, but I am not absolutely certain of anything." This is not the statement of an ignorant person, but of one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century. We conclude then, not with a final attack on Freud, but with a celebration of the method Feynman used to question him. The search for truth does not require a degree in physics. It requires a mindset, the willingness to test, the courage to admit error, and the joy of discovering that the universe is far more interesting and subtle than any single, all-encompassing theory could suggest. Feynman's legacy is an invitation to intellectual adventure. It is a call to leave the library of comfortable ideas and enter the laboratory of reality, even if that laboratory is only your own mind, asking difficult questions. He taught us that science is not a body of knowledge, but a way of thinking, a way of questioning the world, and, above all, ourselves. Embracing this way of thinking is the best defense we have against charlatans, demagogues, and cargo cults of all kinds. It is our most powerful tool for not deceiving ourselves, and on the journey to understanding ourselves and the universe, this is the only tool that truly matters.